Good evening and welcome members, friends, and distinguished guests to the 61st annual meeting of the Providence Preservation Society. Thank you for braving this beautiful, beautiful weather to be with us tonight. I am Chris Marcella, Board Chair of Providence Preservation Society. A special thanks to Rhode Island Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea and newly elected Councilwoman from Providence's Ward 12, Kat Kerwin, for joining us this evening. We are so grateful that Secretary Gorbea accepted our invitation to give welcoming remarks with us tonight. She made history in 2015 when she became the first Hispanic elected to statewide office in New England. Please welcome Secretary Gorbea.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's wonderful to be with so many friends that I don't get to see all the time, and now I'm popping up, and as I see more and more, I'm like, oh my God, there's, okay. It's really great to be here, and of course, let me begin by thanking Brent Runyon and Rachel Robinson for the wonderful invitation, for connecting with my office, and giving me an excuse to be with all of you here tonight. You know, the Providence Preservation Society has been a long-time champion, of course, and you're all, I'm preaching now to the choir, right? A long-time advocate for really not just preserving the buildings, but the stories that really comprise Providence. And that's really what this is about. It's about treasures that go beyond the physical to that which tells us our history. And it's a really important mission. My connection to the society, and Brent probably doesn't even know this, goes back to when I was a program officer. I was the first program officer in economic and community development. Hey! And so I get this grant proposal from this society. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not even from Rhode Island, so these are all new organizations to me. And at the time, you know, they had this idea that they would bring the community together to do something called a charrette. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. To look at this building that had been vacant for, at that time, I think it's something like 80 or 90 years. It was the Masonic Temple. And I was really impressed by their commitment and their vision to bringing the community together for something that seemed very, that could be very dry and sort of just designy, right? Like, oh, we're gonna do this in a back room. No, we want to bring the community together. And so I was able to convince the board, it wasn't that hard to convince them, to do this. And so we funded it. And lo and behold, like every day I get to drive by it when I go to the State House. It's really a remarkable testament to the power of bringing community together to do these things. And so thank you. Thank you to all of you. I know some of you in the audience were involved in that. Thank you for being involved. Can we give you a round of applause? So, now today, as your Secretary of State, I get to also take care of historic treasures through the form of the State Archives. And we have some amazing documents in our vaults. I mean, our documents date back to 1638. And I'm just saying, there are a lot of states, they don't have that. We have one of, yes, 13, because we're one of the original 13 colonies, one of the original 13 hand-drawn copies of the Bill of Rights. We have a broadside of the Declaration of Independence, actually signed by John Hancock. There's only a few dozen of those left in the country. We have the orders basically from the king, ordering the collection of getting to me those ruffians who took over the Gaspee and burned it down. And in a beautiful parchment with this immaculate seal that actually has been preserved. And we have all of these in downtown Providence, which is in a geographic flood zone, which on nights like tonight gives me a little bit of pause. And they are there just in boxes. And so I want to encourage each and every one of you who has not been to the State Archives to come by and take a look. We've also tried to do things like let people know what's there, because if we're ever going to move this, and this is my goal in this next term, is to build a state archives, a proper facility. We're actually, if not the only one of the very few states in the country that does not have a public facility for its state archives. And think about the stories we could tell if we actually were able to exhibit this stuff. So we have a 2-hour validated parking. It's at 337 Westminster Street. Right now we have an exhibit on 150 years of big ideas in Little Rhodey. All sorts of functional models of patents, like a model of Benjamin Franklin's printing press, whose sister-in-law Anne Franklin used to try to publish the Acts of Congress. She had actually a request for that. Things like that that you can't get in Montana or in Washington State or even California. So it's time. It's time for these treasures to be exhibited, for this to be a cultural and historic tourism icon. And so that's part and parcel. And if you want to know more about our efforts on this and what's there, and by the way, we also have really, I need to also broadcast our civics education materials. We've put a lot of stuff online. We've had transcription parties for suffrage documents, things like that that help enhance the accessibility. But in the end, it's not about the online stuff. It's about what you can see and basically up close and personal. So Lane Sparkman, my civics education person, is here, and she's going to stay beyond what I'm going to be able to stay because I have to go somewhere else. At this point, Brent probably is happy that I'm moving on because I'm going on and on about this. But I could not resist because I know that each and every one of you understands what we have to do. We have to commit to investing in this and build a proper facility. We've actually done a site selection study, and we're hoping to put it right across from the State House, where we're already getting 36,000 visitors to the State House, where we're getting 10,000 school children, and for whom going across the street would be a fairly easy ask. And I want to thank Anne, who is one of our tour and visiting centers volunteers extraordinaires. Thank you. Thank you. Please join this effort. I want to make sure that you know about this. And I will go into more detail in the Planning and Architectural Review Committee meeting in March. But if you can't make it to that or you want to know more, please talk to Lane afterwards. She has an official-looking clipboard. So, and thank you. Thank you for the advocacy work that you have embarked on. Thank you for what you are doing today to preserve the city of Providence, our stories, our history, for future generations. And have a very successful evening tonight. Take care.
Thank you, Secretary Gorbea. First of all, that is an amazing idea. Obviously, the archives, where if you haven't gone, go and check them out, but you'll also be really terrified about where they're being stored. So the time is now for that, as well as an opportunity for museum, considering I think if you grow up in Rhode Island as a kid, you go up to Boston to learn about the American Revolution when it started here. So there's a... Yeah, it started here. I know I was trying to be coy, but yeah. Yes, it started here. So good luck with that project, and you'll have our full support. Now I would like to thank our sponsors, shown on the screen right now. Thank you. Especially our partner and preservation sponsor, the Foundry Associates, and offer special thanks to Brown University for hosting us this evening. And with that, at this time, I would like to officially call to order the 61st annual meeting of the Providence Preservation Society. Our first order of business is a report on the financial well-being of the organization, which will be delivered by Vice President Melissa Trapp.
Hello. I am former treasurer and current vice chair of the board. Our current treasurer, Jack Renshaw, is skiing with his grandkids out west, so I'm filling in for the report tonight. Great, we have our partners in preservation up there. First, I want to begin by thanking the members of our strong finance committee. They meet almost every month and volunteer their expertise in their respective fields to benefit our organization. And literally, we could not afford to pay for their time and talents. The current committee, in addition to Jack and myself, is Kim Smith-Barnett, Milton Baxter, Warren Curtis, Kevin Hudley, Paul Capel, and Kevin Hannaran. In addition to the volunteer committee, our bookkeeper, Ken Garapi, who has been with the organization for more than a dozen years, does a great job of keeping everybody in check. Right now, I'm pleased to announce, due to strong fiscal results over the past 5 years, PPS is currently debt-free and has a solid balance sheet. You all know how hard we work to get there, so yeah. That allowed for us to make some investment in the organization last year. PPS upgraded some much-needed member and donor management software, refreshed the website, Wi-Fi, et cetera, all to gear up for our Power of Preservation Education campaign, which will enable PPS to create new and robust programs to preservation education and will fund a number of essential capital improvements to our old brick schoolhouse. Many here tonight have been extremely supportive in this initiative, so thank you. The Shakespeare's Head building at 21 Meeting Street has been fully leased for the past 3 years and now has positive cash flow and supports our education and advocacy programs. Fundraising efforts in 2018 were successful, and we have a lot of thank yous on behalf of the board to share, so I'll try to run through that quickly. We would like to thank the 250 individual donors who made contributions to our annual fund. With an average gift of $485, 38 donors increased their giving from 2017, and 86 donors were new to the annual campaign. These new and increased gifts were matched dollar for dollar by a generous anonymous donor in the amount of $15,000. Thank you to board member Rita Steele for chairing our fall symposium. We had 225 guests attending the 3-day program. The symposium featured events at Grace Episcopal Church, Skyline and Water Place, the offices of DBVW, and the South Street Landing. Another fundraising event we had last year was our Winter Bash. Glitz Glamour, a speakeasy affair, drew approximately 450 guests and was supported by nearly 50 sponsors, both cash and in kind. The event netted just over $31,000 and was our most successful fundraising bash that we've had since 2008. I want to thank the entire bash committee, and particularly our volunteer co-chairs, Christina Robio and Mike Ploud. They did such an amazing job that they get to do it again a month from now. We want to thank the following grantors who are supporting some really interesting educational programs that we're currently running at PPS. They are the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, City of Providence Art, Culture, and Tourism, the Herman H. Rose Civic, Cultural, and Media Access Fund at the Rhode Island Foundation, the Daniel Rosenblatt Foundation, Felicia Fund, Lillian Cummings Streetscape Fund, Dr. Joseph Chazen, Heritage Harbor Foundation, Historic New England, the Hope Foundation, and the Rhode Island General Assembly. And vital to our organization are these 27 partners in preservation members who we want to thank. It is one of the few income sources that PPS can count on each year to help keep us in the black that we know that we have coming in. Angela Congdon does a great job of managing this program, and I know she would love for it to be an even 30. So if you would like to join this illustrious group, please track down Angela after the meeting. And because we have to put our money where our mouth is, in addition to donating their time and talents, 100% of the Board of Trustees made philanthropic gifts to PPS in 2008. So thank you to my trustee partners. Our members, yeah, why not? Our membership stands strong at just over 520 member households. If you're not a current member, please take the membership brochure from the check-in table. And if you already are, thank you. And it's always great to join with a friend, so you can always grab somebody else and join. In addition to our operating funds, our endowment investments, which are managed by Parsons Capital and the Rhode Island Foundation, stand at a little over $1.4 million. We're also in the process of conducting our 4th full audit. So donors are welcome to examine our financial reports at any time. This concludes the 2018 Treasurer's Report, though I do have a special announcement. In your brochure, you can see that there's a form, there's an envelope, and I invite you to make a tax-deductible donation towards the organization for any amount using that gift envelope. Anyone that makes a donation tonight will be entered to win 2 VIP tickets to the February 23rd Winter Bash, or 2 preview party tickets to the Festival of Historic Houses. We will draw a name and announce the winner at the end of the meeting, and envelopes will be collected by volunteers during the Most Endangered Properties presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. At this time, I would like to recognize and thank the 3 PPS trustees rolling off the board this year. Please stand if I call your name. Ian Barticle, Steve Kuhn, Paul Capel. Thank you. Steve's up. Steve, thank you for your service to PPS over the years, and thank you for your applause. Next, we will hear from Laurel Bowerman, PPS trustee and member of the Board Governance and Nominating Committee.
Good evening. I'm here for the formal part of the meeting to continue, and I'd like to present the new trustee slate. It's my pleasure to present the new trustees that will start a 3-year term starting in 2019. And please stand as I call your name. Nick Audiello, Aria Bilodeau, Heather Evans, and Wendy McGaw. Thank you. And their CVs are in your program. So please take a minute to read them. I'd also like to consider the slate of officers for 2019, and continuing as president is Chris Marcella. Please stand. Yeah. And the following will be officers for a 1-year term: Vice President Warren Yeager, Vice President Melissa Trapp, Treasurer Laurel Bowerman, Secretary Kate Amaral, and Assistant Secretary Rita Danielle Steele. So thank you for your service. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I move that the 2019 slate of officers and new trustees be approved.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Really? Not even for, okay. Motion carries with the majority of members present voting in the affirmative. Thank you. I would like to officially welcome our new PPS trustees and thank our returning trustees as shown on the screen. Thank you for all your continued commitment to this organization, truly. And this concludes the business of the annual meeting of the Providence Preservation Society. At this time, I invite Executive Director Brent Runyon, now known as the Preserver, to the stage as we look back at some key moments of 2018. Let me add how grateful we are to celebrate Brent's 5-year anniversary. It only took you 5 years to get on the cover of a magazine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Can we go ahead and click to the next slide, please? Barry Fain is a publisher, as you know, of Eastside Monthly and other magazines, and a great friend, former trustee of PPS. So when he told me we'd get the cover this month, I assumed he meant the Preservation Society. But anyway, I am honored to be the face and voice of the Preservation Society. It's been a great 5 years. I'm looking forward to the 6th year and beyond for the organization. So anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. It is really my pleasure to represent this organization. Each year brings challenges and opportunities to the organization. As you've heard from Melissa, we're in a strong financial position. We couldn't have done it without her. She was treasurer for 6 years and really, before I was here, really led us into the place we are today. So I really want to thank her for her continued leadership at the board level. But also, you know, my staff, there are 5 of us full-time. We have about 20 trustees in any given year and hundreds of volunteers. And it takes all of us to make everything happen. And as you'll see in my presentation, we do a lot for a pretty small organization. Of course, also you know Angela, Kate, they've been with us for several years. Rachel, who's been with us for just over a year, it's her second meeting. And Mark Hutchinson's first meeting, he joined us a few months ago as our office administrator, and he's really added a lot of great energy, a lot of good ideas to the organization. So thank you, Mark. We're glad to have you here with us. We're also joined by 4 interns last year, graduate and undergraduate students from various colleges and universities who worked on an amazing array of projects over about 9 months that they were sort of staggered with us, from expanding the College Hill Local Historic District to surveying Benefit Street, the various buildings there, which was our second time surveying the full street to see how things were progressing or not progressing, but also assisting with major advocacy initiatives throughout the city. So every year we have great interns. They're really invaluable. If you have kids, grandkids, send them our way. We'd love to put them to work. In the next few minutes, I want to highlight the incredible work that we've been doing over the last year and even the last few years, because some of these projects stretch over many years. And you can see this is our mission statement. We're constantly advocating, collaborating. We couldn't do it without our collaborators, and promoting the amazing resources that we have here in the city of Providence. The last time we were joined, about this time last year, we were joined by Sarah Bronin. So I'm going to take you through the year. Bear with me. A lot of you were here with us, but I think it really serves us well to reflect on what we did in the last year. Sarah is a preservationist, a professor, a lawyer at UConn. She's the first lady of the city of, what, New Haven? Is that where UConn is? Stanford. Sorry. Where? Stores. I'm still from Georgia, sorry. Connecticut's like over there somewhere. But the preservation of the Trump era was the theme of her talk. We learned a lot about sort of how we might see the federal government treating preservation issues. They're still on track with that. Everything else is out the window. But preservation at the federal level is also an interest that we have at PPS. We don't just work in the city, and we don't just work statewide. We also work at the federal level. So I was actually pleased to go down to Advocacy Week last year with our partners, Preservation Action, who work across the country. And one of the highlights was meeting Congressman Cicilline, who's a great supporter, a member of the Preservation Caucus, and talking with him about the different things like the historic tax credits and other incentives. Of course, our entire delegation supports the preservation work, preservation policies at the federal level. So my role last year was mainly to thank them. Anyway, as a result of going down, this year, Rachel and I are the statewide coordinators for Preservation Action this year. Rachel will be going down in March, and we invite any of you who want to join to lobby our legislators or legislators from other states. It's really important that we do this, and Rhode Island needs to be present at this and doing this work. So please talk to Rachel or me if you're interested in joining us this year. Last year, Melissa already mentioned the Bash. We had a great time. And I want to thank, again, the Foundry Associates, Tom and Tony, for hosting us at Alco, which was a former home of U.S. Rubber and American Locomotive Works. And it was our third time being at one of their buildings at Alco. We love it every time. They're great buildings. And I think this was the last space to be outfitted, so we're probably done having parties at the Alco complex. But speaking of the Bash, our 16th Winter Bash is this year. We're thrilled to be going down to a place in South Providence, the Bohms Theater, built in 1921. And Michael and Christina have come up with the theme of Hollywood to celebrate the historic legacy of that building. It'll be actually 99% completely renovated, which is unusual for us, but we invite you to join us. It should be a really a great time. So once the Bash was over last year, we began planning our spring and fall programs. Each of these was designed to provoke conversations, bring community together, and lead us to solutions for some of our endangered places. Rachel actually is our Director of Preservation. She curated a series of talks in the spring centered around the Works Progress Administration. We have an amazing variety of resources in Providence that were built during that era. Several of our local schools, projects at Roger Williams Park, and the Fountain at Lippett Memorial Park, and we had some great programs at each of those. Taylor Polides couldn't make it tonight, but he rounded out the program at the end of the year with a talk about the wedding cake house. And how many of you were there for that? Does anyone remember the lyrics to My Old Trundle Bed? So we had a pianist, and Taylor has a great voice, and we all sang My Old Trundle Bed together. It was the most memorable program. In the fall, we worked with artists Mary Beth Meehan, Holly Ewald, Maureen Taylor to curate a series of walking tours that kicked off a major initiative that paired artists with scholars to create original works of art related to 4 of our struggling endangered properties. The 5 artists and scholar teams led tours of Paragon Mill, Knight Memorial Library, Broad Street Synagogue, and Parcel 1A on the Providence Riverfront. We have advocates for each of those here tonight. Mostly, I think, Knight Memorial Library. We're really fortunate to have the support of RISCA, Rich, the city's Art Project Fund, and Dr. Chazen in support of this project. And the project actually extends to the spring where we will present 5 original works of art related to these 4 different places. So we'll be announcing that shortly. So from in-town walks to out-of-town tours, PPS got around a lot last year. Our Heritage Travel program took off in 2018 with our second trip to Cuba in January. About a year ago, Joan, we were there, sunny, beautiful. But it concluded with a trip to Detroit, which was a really fun time with about 30 travelers. And each time we travel, we don't do it just for fun. It is a revenue source, actually. But really it's to learn. We engage with locals, practitioners and residents. We learn about their architectural landmarks, their assets, but also their preservation struggles and solutions that they find. We're always inspired when we come back on how we might do things here. It also gives a chance for PPS trustees and staff to interact more with members of the society. So it's a really great way to get to know each other. So this fall, we're looking forward to offering a second trip to Detroit and an inaugural trip to New Orleans, which Rachel is curating with Wendy McGall, one of our new trustees. And we're very excited about that. We'll be announcing the details next month, so stay tuned for that. Also last year, we had a unique opportunity to help celebrate with homeowner Nancy Sharon 225th anniversary of the Morris Brown House, which you can see here. This was one of our a rare architectural landmark that shows sort of the historic agricultural legacy of that part of Providence. And she's done a masterful job of restoring it. We had more than 100 members, trustees and neighbors turn out to tour the house and the grounds. And then Councilwoman Nerva LaFortune read a proclamation that Mayor Lorza presented to the homeowner. It was a really special day. Last year, we took the opportunity to work with our great partners, the West Broadway Neighborhood Association, to co-present a house tour in Providence's Armory district. And you see some great photographs here, I think, from Clark Shuttle. And it was a wonderful way for us to offer a tour in that neighborhood, but also work with a partner. Later that year, Trustee Steve Kuhn led us through a visioning process for future festivals. And we're really excited to implement some of those the ideas that came out of that visioning process, and we hope to see all of you at our house tour in June this year, which will be held in the Patterson Park and Wayland neighborhoods. So we're very excited. We're gearing up for that. And we're looking for co-chairs for the house tour committee. If anybody's interested, we'd love to have you involved. Later that year, Melissa also mentioned the Symposium. It was a great 3-day event. This program really is the one where we try to bring along with the annual meeting, but really bring national thinkers to Providence to work with our local thinkers as well. We have great talent here. And last year we brought Ron Henderson to Providence. He was the mastermind with several other people about City Walk, a great landscape through Providence from one side to the other. But his keynote lecture was about the natural history of cities, and he really he awakened to us to the idea of what river cities like Providence will face with the sea level rise. So it was quite eye-opening and impactful, and we have the video linked from our website if you weren't able to join us. So as we continue to explore and document cultural landscapes, we have teamed with the Preservation Society of Newport County to host a research fellow, Jen Robinson, who's here running the projector. And she is assessing and updating a state survey of cultural landscapes that was done more than 10 years ago. So we're really thrilled. She's going to work with us to focus on the cultural landscapes of Providence. And so thank you, Jen, for being here tonight. But it wasn't just all travel and events and programs. While these are critical for fundraising, education, and awareness, the heart of the organization, the purpose for our being, is advocacy for this community. Most of the projects that I'll talk about span multiple years, but I want to take and there are many projects I'm not going to talk about. Rachel is present at every public hearing that exists in the city. We speak at most of those, but I'm just going to touch on a few projects that were really meaningful for both of us last year, and that really speak to PPS's role in shaping the capital city. The first one, look at these magnificent granite steps, and this photograph taken at an amazing time of the year. This is public property. It's a public right-of-way, the Meeting Street Steps, just up from our office. And just as we did back in 1999, we undertook a major restoration project. There were 2 head-on collisions, one at the top, one at the bottom, and the city, of course, has no money. So they asked us to step in and help fund and oversee the restoration of the steps yet again. So thanks to generous donations from the Lillian Cummings Streetscape Fund, Buff Chase, and the Unschlager Foundation, we were able to fund and repair the steps by the end of the year. We worked with Corey DeBoer, who's an architect, contractor, site-specific, Bob O'Brien, who actually donated one of the missing bollards. I'm not sure where that went. And Jan's Metalcraft, who handcrafted the new iron rails that you see here. So I encourage you to check out these steps. They're 18th century and really a remarkable landscape feature in our city. And later this year, we'll be installing a new historic marker that celebrates both the history of the steps, but also the work that PPS has done to maintain them over the years. This is the Cranston Street Armory, and just briefly, for nearly 3 years, Rachel or I have been at, Tom's here. Hey, Tom. Our speaker just arrived. That was another journey. But for over 3 years, Rachel and I have been at the table with the Department of Administration trying to figure out what the process should be to find a new use for this building. They've gone through a lot of processes that come up with uses or bad stories that don't encourage use. And so we encourage them to do a more community-engaged process that would find solutions from the ground up rather than from the top down from a single consultant. And I'm pleased to say that they did issue an RFI at the end of the year. It closes tomorrow. I've heard of at least 2 really great suggestions that would phase in a use as well as multiple users would be financially sustainable. And so we're looking forward to seeing an RFP, and we're looking forward to people responding to the RFP. I think we're on the right track. It's been a long and arduous process. We all work in our own ways. Kari's been at the table as well. It's been frustrating. But I think we're making progress. So we look forward to seeing what happens this year. A great success story. Beginning in 2017, PPS led an effort to oppose plans to demolish 4 buildings on Brown's campus, including the Sharp Carriage House, which you see here in the upper right, which they were going to remove in order to build a new performing arts center. Fortunately, in response to community and student concerns, Brown revised their plans, moved the Art Center just north of Angel Street, and required no demolition. And so we consider that a great success. And of course, as you probably have seen, the Sharp House itself was moved around the corner and will be restored. And I think the History Department will be very happy once that is all concluded. So that was a great success for 2018, which is when the work actually happened. And of course, PPS is not simply advocating for the preservation of historic places. Since the 70s, we've been, well, probably since the beginning originally, the Preservation Society has been an advocate for well-designed new construction and planning. And last year, we spent quite a bit of time building a citywide coalition to oppose a project that would basically toss out community-driven planning processes and also impose on a public park, regardless of the design, which is not even in the works yet. The Preservation Society was opposed to this project for those primary reasons. And unfortunately, we were not successful. I learned a lot about election year politics, more than I ever wanted to know. But as you know, there's a lawsuit happening. PPS is not involved directly, but we are supporting behind the scenes the people who are leading that. So we'll see where it goes.
Thank you.
More to come. So as I said, there are many more things that we worked on in 2018. These are just a couple of highlights. And I want to move on now to something that's all wholly positive, which is our historic marker program. We have more than 1,500 of these markers throughout the community. And last year we awarded 18 new markers to buildings all over the city. It's quite a stringent process, and I think the fact that people keep applying for these really shows the dedication that people have to the quality of the built environment, to the historic patina that Providence has. You'd think at some point we would have awarded all the markers we could award, but they just keep applying, and we're really happy to award them. The marker committee also hosted, you see here on the lower left, a region-wide marker roundtable. I mean, they brought in people from all over New England to talk about the challenges, the ideas, how marker programs work, and hopefully Rachel will be initiating another one of those this year. I think it was a very successful outreach for us. So, a lot of things that we do. How do we tell people what we do? Hopefully you all know what we do because you're here. But communicating is one of the largest challenges for an organization of this size with no dedicated communication staff people. But communicating what we do, but also what makes Providence special, takes a real team. So I want to give a shout out to 4 social media volunteers who worked with us last year, including Liz Warburton, Mark Guarea, Maureen Taylor, and Julia Barber. They helped us significantly increase our followers on both Facebook and Instagram in 2018, meaning that our preservation advocacy and education work reaches a much wider audience. I encourage all of you to follow us if you're on social media. We're also on Twitter, but these 4 volunteers are really instrumental in helping us communicate to a broad audience. And of course, we're in a very wired world, so we spent a lot of time last year putting more things online. It's important that we use the internet to the greatest extent possible, and I'm really pleased to announce for the first time, we put, first time on 2 of these, but last year we put our main website was completely updated thanks to Jay Hogue, a former trustee and web developer. Thank you, Jay. But we also created 2 new online resources of resources. So the first one goes back quite a few years. In 2010, when Vicki Vey was interim director, she got a grant from the state to do a recent past survey. And that was overseen while she was there, done by Ned Connors. And then due to turnover at the Preservation Society, the information just sat at the State Preservation Office until last year when we dug it out and we hired someone to create what is called a story map, which you see here. So you can go to this site from our website and see resources that are not considered historic probably by most people. We call them recent past, which is not a very defined term, but it definitely includes things up to the 80s, I believe. And so I encourage you to check that out. The other one, I think the board will be happy about. I'm not even sure I've told them. As you recall, in 2003, we published the PPSAIA Rhode Island Guide to Providence Architecture with beautiful writing by Mac Woodward and beautiful photography by Warren Jagger, and it's been out of print for several years. So the board's goal was to have it an available resource online. Again, working with Jay as well as an archivist, Claire Uziel, last year, we have moved forward. We have a great framework. The website is online. We have 3 of the, I believe, 12 tours already loaded on there. So I encourage you to check that out. Let us know what you think. I think we have some more tweaks to make to the technology, to the what you see. But the information will be really, really valuable. It's our intention to include not only content from the guide, but also content from our Gowdy database, our marker program spreadsheet, and any other database that we have, the house markers and whatnot. So this will be basically, if you want to know something about a property, this is where you'll be able to go to find it. So we're very excited about that. Mr. President, that concludes my report of the Society's activities for 2018. Thank you.
Thank you again, Brent, as always, for leading us through another successful and obviously very busy year at PPS. I'd just like to take a brief moment and to share some of the programs and initiatives that we're working on as we begin the new year. We'll be doing a whole download of this at this time next year, hopefully of checking all of these off the boxes, but just a few of the things that we're working on. Capital campaign, education program, continuation of heritage travel program, as Brent mentioned, reintroduction of a director of education, a new traditional building arts program, capital improvements to the old brick schoolhouse as we celebrate its 250th year in 2019. Grants, etc. I encourage you, I apologize, I encourage you to look for details on all of these on our monthly news e-letter, and of course we'll continue to keep up to date on pressing preservation and development news and our advocacy alert emails, which obviously come up and change on a weekly basis. Speaking of new projects and grants, I would like to invite Dr. Joyce Stevos from the Heritage Harbor Foundation to the stage. Joyce is also a former Providence Preservation Society trustee. Is she saying anything? No? Do you want to say anything? Do you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Okay, so you say something. Otherwise, I'm just thanking you.
I do have a couple of things to say. I'm pleased that you're talking about having an education program again. So many years ago, I was the supervisor of social studies in the Providence Public Schools, and we worked so closely with the Preservation Society to have an education program, and since I had the job for about 20 years, there was a healthy amount of money that was in my budget, and I was pleased to fight for that every year to make sure that the program went on, because I firmly believe that one of the ways to study history is not from a book, but when you live in a place that's so rich in history, one of the best ways is to get out to see it, feel it, smell it, and I think that's what I hope to have children and their teachers do, and was a great time. But now I'm a member of the Heritage Harbor Foundation, and the Heritage Harbor Foundation is the outgrowth of a movement begun in the 1980s to create Rhode Island's own state history museum. When that project was not approved, the Heritage Harbor Corporation turned its assets into a foundation and created a grant-making endowment. The board of the Heritage Harbor Foundation believes that an understanding of history and heritage enhances personal self-esteem, instills in individuals and communities a sense of place, and leads to greater civic engagement. The foundation seeks to fund the vital, the essential extra that will ensure the permanent record, uncover neglected aspects of Rhode Island's history, improve access to educational resources, increase collaboration between the state's history and history organizations, and your project to dedicate space and educational materials both within the old brick schoolhouse and supplemented with an outdoor kiosk to document the history of the building and to highlight it within the context of the Providence Preservation Society, Providence, and Rhode Island history, will contribute to our understanding of the Rhode Island family album and the different uses of this building in our past and present. On behalf of the Heritage Harbor Foundation Board, I am pleased to present to the Providence Preservation Society this check for $10,000.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Joyce, and to the Heritage Harbor Foundation for this generous support of our public engagement. Who do I give this check to before I lose it? Oh, thank you. I now want to introduce the incredible Rachel Robinson, Director of Preservation, to announce the 2019 Most Endangered Properties list. Now that Rachel has been with us for a year and a half, she's had time to get to know and love many Providence's landmarks as she continues to promote new life for our MAPs, and as Brent mentioned, shows up at literally every single meeting that the City of Providence hosts for anything related to preservation and even beyond. So, Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, all of you. I have just been here over a year, and I want to say, sitting down here and seeing all of you tonight, I feel so lucky to know so many of you very well. Either we've traveled together, or we sit in the peanut gallery at public hearings, or you share so much time serving on committees, so thank you very much. I do have one quick housekeeping note. If you do have your envelopes from your programs and would like to be entered in the drawing for some BASH tickets, because you're not going to want to miss BASH, we'll be able to collect those at the table at the front when you leave, and we'll do the drawing tomorrow and let the winner know. So thank you. All right, let me find my space here. So it's important for preservationists to be cautiously optimistic. And as such, I'm hopeful that our drawing attention to local endangered properties each year will hasten their restoration and minimize their threats. This year's most endangered properties span 4 centuries. Now, as a native Southerner, I think that's incredible because we don't have too many 18th century buildings. They represent a wide range in size, style, age, and use. There are some obvious ones and others less well known. We encourage you to visit the properties and see what makes them special to Providence. Please use the map in your program as your guide. First, let's take a look at 2 properties previously listed. We are delighted with the progress at the Wedding Cake House on Broadway. Kudos to the Dirt Palace ladies with some great support from Adler's Hardware. And as you've heard, we're also thrilled that the Boehm's Theater in South Providence is once again functioning entertainment space, and we hope you'll join us on February 23rd at the Bash. And now, without further ado, the list that nobody wants to be on, no building wants to be on, but together maybe we can get them off the list. I present for the first time the 2019 Most Endangered Properties list. The Industrial Trust Building, downtown, 1928. Sadly, another year has passed without a new plan of action to save this Rhode Island icon. The old girl turned 90 in October, and we are more determined than ever to help her find a new 21st century identity and to remain the tallest building in the state for a little bit longer. The William R. Babcock II House in Elmwood, circa 1893. This vacant and vulnerable property is unusual for its rubble stone facade and turret, but representative of a broader stock of proud late Victorian middle-class homes in Elmwood. With some love and remediation, it can once again shine as a family residence. The Rialto Theater, downtown, 1820 to mid-20th century. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more interesting pedigree for any building in Providence. It began life as the Westminster Congregational Church, and by the turn of the 20th century, without much adaptation, became a skating rink and then vaudeville and motion picture venue called the Scenic Temple Theater. After the First World War, the 1829 Ionic portico was removed, and a modern facade added for its stint as the remodeled Rialto Theater. Later, the back 2/3 of this architectural sandwich was removed for use as a parking lot. I have great hopes that in the creative capital, we can find an innovative design solution for this underutilized relic. The Water Supply Board building in Mount Pleasant, circa 1908. This now vacant municipal building is eyed, as we understand it, by a neighboring high school for future expansion and perhaps demolition for surface parking. We strongly advocate for the building's adaptive reuse, as the design and floor plan easily lend themselves to flexibility and versatility. The Richard Brown House on the Butler Hospital campus. 1731. While age alone is not always a valid reason to save a building, I'd argue it is the primary reason to save this rarity, the first documented and therefore oldest brick dwelling in Providence. We are hopeful that as Butler celebrates its 175th anniversary this year, this historic house will benefit from renewed appreciation and interest, and of course, some generous fundraising dollars. Okay, some of you all brace yourselves. The Beresford Nicholson Estate, 1909-1919. Only 2 families have owned this large Blackstone estate over the last century. As development pressures in this neighborhood increase due to desirability and generosity of lot size, early 20th century properties like this one are under threat. Currently, a developer is seeking demolition of the house and outbuildings and has applied for a major subdivision into 10 buildable lots. This property is a prime example of neighborhood vulnerability when buildings are not under the protection of local historic district designation. It's also a really great example of when concerned neighbors come together to oppose a threat. So kudos to all of you who've been working on that effort. The West Side Park at Parcel P4, 2019. You may be asking yourself why we would list a buildingless lot that is under construction. Well, you may have heard about a tower project that's been in the news lately. We are concerned that this new public amenity has been adversely affected by private development before it even opens. The state decreased the size of our forthcoming public park by 11% last summer to accommodate the proposed Hope Point Tower. I can't even say it at this point. This was prior to the City Council's changing of our zoning ordinance to allow the tower project to move forward. You can guarantee that PPS will continue to monitor the park construction and design development of the tower. The Broad Street Synagogue in Elmwood, 1910. This significant former house of worship is individually listed on the National Register, but sadly threatened by vacancy and neglect. PPS has offered to help the owner find a tenant and new use for the property so that restoration work can proceed and ward off further decay. Olneyville, industrial/commercial buildings, various locations and dates. 2 former industrial buildings in Olneyville were nominated by members of the public for this year's list. Our committee that vets the MEP nominations thought that it would be more prudent to acknowledge all vulnerable mill buildings and commercial buildings in the neighborhood. It's been 19 years since collectively all of Providence's 19th century buildings were listed, and many, thankfully, have been mill buildings, not all buildings. 19th century mill buildings were listed, and thankfully many have been repurposed. We would like to draw attention this year to those still struggling in Olneyville and encourage continued reuse and investment. And finally, St. Teresa of Avila Church in Olneyville, 1883. This former Catholic church on Manton Avenue has displayed two distinct styles in its history. It was originally an 1880s Gothic revival design and changed to an Italian Renaissance design in the 1930s. Unfortunately, the changing immigrant congregation dwindled and the building has been shuttered for a decade. It is currently owned by the Providence Redevelopment Agency, and we are optimistic the city will be successful in finding a new use for it soon. That concludes the 2019 MEP list. More information on each property is available on our website, or will be very soon. Please follow our e-news and advocacy alerts. Again, we are preaching to the choir here, but we hope to provide some positive developments on these 10 properties. You'll see that throughout the year, we encourage you to attend public hearings and to write to your elected officials. Citizen and neighborhood input does make a big difference, so please keep up the good work. And now, Tom, if you'd like to come down. We're very, very, very glad you're here. I'll introduce Tom while we are switching out his the thumb drives. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome tonight's keynote speaker, especially after the travel day he's had. So thank goodness you're here, and I'm glad you're here in one piece. I was in the audience for Tom's presentation last fall at the National Trust for Historic Preservation's Past Forward Conference, which took place in a very smoky San Francisco. I'm so pleased that he and others are exploring preservation from the perspective of health and science to help us qualify and understand what we know to be true, that old places make us feel good. Tom serves as Vice President and Senior Counsel of the National Trust for Historic Preservation in Washington, D.C. He is the 2013 recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Rome Prize in Historic Preservation. And his book that he's going to talk about tonight is the product of his envy-inducing fellowship and sabbatical in Rome. Tom holds degrees from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and Johns Hopkins University. We are extremely grateful that he was able to get here today. We're all in for a treat, so without further delay, Tom Mays.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am actually really delighted to be here today. My first few attempts to land in Providence were not successful. I did, however, discover that I do remember the Lord's Prayer. And I repeated it quite a few times, focusing on thy will be done. But I am really happy to be here and happy to share this information. And I hope what I want to do is talk for maybe 20 minutes and then hopefully have an engaged conversation with you all and answer some questions that you have. This is a topic that I think all of you care deeply about. And I'm so grateful that you do the work that you do, as you'll hear in a little bit. I have my own memories of Providence, and I'll share a few of those when we get to the end. As Rachel said, this is the product of my sabbatical at the American Academy in Rome. And just to make people further jealous, I like to show people the American Academy building, which was designed by McKim, Mead, and White. This is where I was in Rome, and my studio was the tall second-floor window to the left of center. A really, really wonderful place to be. And I'll come back to this theme, but it was a building that was purpose-built to house architects, artists, preservationists, sculptors, and people studying the classics, including historians, and was designed to cause them to collaborate and have interdisciplinary interactions, and I think it succeeds in that. So I'm grateful to the National Trust and the American Academy for this. So Rachel talked about the book a little bit. The result of my sabbatical was a series of essays that were first published online by the National Trust called Why Old Places Matter, and it ended up being a book published by Rowman and Littlefield through the American Association for State and Local History section, and you can buy it from them or online. And we also are going to have a book signing tomorrow at Books on the Square at 7 o'clock, which is in your program. So I invite you to give it a read, and I hope you'll enjoy it. I also want people to engage with these ideas. So why do places matter? Why do old places matter? I began to explore this topic because of teaching historic preservation law. And at the beginning of each one of my courses, I would ask my students, so why do we have historic preservation law? And very quickly, it would devolve into a discussion about why we have historic preservation at all. I was a little bit surprised to discover that my students, many of whom were graduate students in historic preservation, did not necessarily have ready answers for why we do this work. why we do what we do. What difference does it make if we save these old places or not? What difference does it make to people's lives? They would answer the question by talking about the things that are in the statutes, protecting property values, revitalizing communities, saving our heritage. But those didn't seem to get to the deeper ideas for why old places matter to me. So I proposed this project to go and look at these ideas and to try to delve into it. And ultimately, I wrote about 14 ideas. I'm not going to review all 14 ideas with you today. But I also discovered that I didn't think even the 14 ideas captured everything. That the reasons that places, old places, matter to people are so profound and so all-encompassing that 14 words doesn't entirely capture it. And what I really wanted to do was to spur a conversation for people so that they could reflect on why places actually matter to them. So I selected a few to go through this evening with you all. And as I go through them, I would invite you to be thinking, does that resonate with me? Does that make sense to me or not? And what other words might I use to talk about why old places, wherever they are, whether Providence or elsewhere, actually matter to me? So, why old places matter? One of the first words I heard was continuity, that old places provide people with a sense of continuity that is beneficial for them from an emotional and psychological point of view. And I read deeply in place attachment. I found this wonderful quote from Maria Lewicka. The majority of authors agree that development of emotional bonds with places is a prerequisite of psychological balance and good adjustment, and that it helps to overcome identity crises and gives people the sense of stability they need in the ever-changing world. We see this in our communities, the way people become attached to places, like schools. In the upper right is Caldwell Station School, where my father went to school, where his family went to school, which continues to be used as a family preschool today. That continuity of place is beneficial to people. But we see this idea of continuity perhaps most strongly when the continuity is broken. So the large photograph of the church is Palmer Chapel in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where people were forcibly removed during the 30s to create that park. Still, 3 and 4 generations later, people come back to this church to reconnect with that place and reconnect with that community. They were profoundly affected by being forcibly removed. And we see this all over the world. So in the lower right is Matera, Italy, where people were forcibly removed for better housing, which might sound familiar to you all. The granddaughter of a woman who was removed said that her grandmother always said that the community was never the same after they were removed from that place. Old places provide people with a sense of continuity. Memory. The architect Mary Donati says, old buildings are like memories you can touch. And old places serve as mnemonic aids that trigger our memory. The geographers Derek Alterman and Stephen Holscher say that people anchor their divergent memories in place. And we see this in the way people talk about a memory palace as a technique for remembering things. That if you place your memories in a room of a house in your mind, then you'll remember it. That's how profound the connection between memory and place is. And like when we see this image of the reflecting pool on the mall, I wasn't at that place, but I still have a sort of collective memory of it. These places are part of our memory, and old places serve as mnemonic aids for our memories. Individual identity. Old places are part of our identity, and this has long been recognized from Cicero, who wrote movingly about returning to his grandfather's house, to James Marston Fitch, the preservationist, who wrote that preservation affords the opportunity for the citizens to regain a sense of identity with their own origins, of which they have often been robbed by the sheer process of urbanization. Old places are part of our identity, but our identity also changes over time, and our attachment with places grows. So I show two images from my own childhood. My church, where I was raised in the upper left, but also my great-grandfather's simple white southern farmhouse. But over time, I've also grown to love and feel attached to and have as a part of my identity DuPont Circle, shown in the upper right, and the American Academy in Rome. So old places form a part of our identity, and the loss of them can have a profound impact on how people feel about themselves. Civic identity. The preservation movement has long championed the idea of civic identity, and I use Independence Hall as an example. It's a place that's been preserved for a long time as a part of the national identity of the United States. But as I talked to people about this idea, I found that they were a little reticent to talk about national identity in connection with historic preservation. I think that's partly summed up in something that Edward Said said. He talked about the vexed issue of nationalism and national identity, of how memories of the past are shaped in accordance with a certain notion of what we, or for that matter, they, really are. We've left people out of the story. Slaves were not mentioned at plantation houses. Native Americans were treated as the enemy at frontier forts, and countless workers and ethnic groups were completely left out of our story of place. And we know that place can also be manipulated to tell a certain type of story. And the example I use is Luigi Moretti's Square Colosseum in Rome, which Mussolini used expressly to tie his regime to classical Rome and imperial Rome. But here's the really interesting thing to me. Old places tend to be the vortex and venue where our ideas of identity change over time. They may even foster the types of conversations that are necessary to change our identity over time. The example I use is one that's very much in the news, the Confederate statue from my own hometown in North Carolina, which you can see covered with tarps. I can talk for hours about Confederate memorials, but the point of it is these places are so important that they become the lightning rods for our sense of national identity and civic identity. You see this sense of civic identity in all the places that we care about in our communities, but you also get a sense of universal identity from places around the world. The example I use is the Bamayan Buddhas on the right here, which were destroyed in an act of destruction of religious iconography. And when they were lost, if you followed it, then you may have felt what I felt, which was a great sense of loss that I think was felt worldwide. So these places also reflect our universal identity. Beauty. Beauty has long been one of the reasons that we do what we do. We want our cities and communities to be beautiful. And if you Google beautiful places, you get a whole lot of natural places, a whole lot of old places, and just a smattering of new places. So beauty has always been at the heart of what we do, and yet we often don't ground our decisions in the idea of beauty anymore. And I found that as I talked to people about beauty, they also had a sense of reticence about talking about it. And this is for many reasons. The perceived subjective nature of beauty, the elitist characteristics of beauty, that host of things. And yet I found studies done by the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment in Great Britain that tried to promote the idea of beauty in the civic realm for the built environment. And this quote captured what a lot of those said. Beauty is a deeply positive experience contributing to happiness and well-being. But here's the thing that I found most interesting as I studied this issue. Historic preservation is the field in our society where notions of beauty change over time. So many of us in this room can undoubtedly remember when Victorian buildings were considered ugly, when Art Deco was considered hopelessly commercial, when the moderne was not valued, and now even we look at brutalism as beautiful, as you can see from the Salk Institute in the far right. I even found beauty in the graffitied concrete interior of Miami Marine Stadium, shown here. We are the place where these notions of beauty change. We are the field that knows how much more difficult it is to save an ugly building than a beautiful building. So beauty is one of the reasons that old places matter, and I believe we should advocate for beauty in our communities. Sacredness. People all over the world travel to old places to experience feelings of awe and sacredness, such as what I felt in this church here, the Sanctuario de Chimayo in New Mexico. And people have done this throughout cultures and throughout history. We don't often talk about it in our field, except with traditional cultural properties and with Native American sites. And yet sacredness remains one of the reasons that people save old places. Old places also become sanctified sometimes by the types of things that happened there historically. And here I show a battlefield on the right, but also on the upper right, the archaeological site of Shockoe Bottom in Richmond, Virginia, which was the largest slave trading area of the Upper South before the Civil War. Those places have been sanctified by the things that have happened there and have become sacred. Old places matter because they are or may be perceived of as being sacred. Ancestry. Again, one of those topics that we used to talk about as being a reason that we saved old places, that old places connected us to our ancestors. But again, the preservation movement, for a while, moved away from that idea because of the perception of elitism and the perception of exclusivity. And yet there's been an explosion in genealogical research and genealogical interest. And of course, when people are looking for their ancestors, what are they usually asking? Where am I from? Where are my people from? In recent years, because of the explosion of this, some remarkable things have happened. In the upper left is a plantation site called Somerset Place in North Carolina, where Dorothy Sproul Redmond started the first reunion of the descendants of the slaves and other people who worked there. And she wrote a book about this experience and talked movingly of how, until she had the tangible connection with that place, none of the documents about her history seemed to matter as much. It was that tangible connection that gave her a profound sense of meaning and belonging. Old places matter because they connect us to our ancestors, whether they're from a farmhouse in North Carolina, Ellis Island, or from Somerset Plantation. History and learning. These are the traditional reasons that we talk about why old places matter and why historic preservation matters. And what I like to emphasize about this is not only the history part, but the way it is different from studying things through documentary evidence or through books. Old places matter for history and learning because you get to experience these old places with all of your senses. It's like full body immersion in history. And in fact, you can recognize this because what do most adults remember about their history classes in junior high school and high school? The field trips. That's what they remember because they experienced it in a really visceral, multi-sensory way. So people at President Lincoln's cottage like to touch the handrail that they know Lincoln touched, to feel that connection with him. At Emily Dickinson's house in Amherst, people can experience something about her poetry that they couldn't know otherwise. And there's Old Salem in the lower right, where I went on field trips. But there's something else that people learn by the continued existence of these places. And I show one of my favorite historic sites in the country in the upper right. It's the Kwantai Temple in Mendocino, California, in Northern California, which was built in 1854 as a Taoist temple by the Chinese immigrants. And when I visited there, one of the descendants of the builders said to me, what people learn by the continued existence of this place is that we were here. If that building disappeared, people would not have that visceral reminder that the Chinese were in California in 1854. Old places matter because of history and learning. Community. Old places matter because they foster a sense of community. And the writer Wendell Berry says, a community is the mental and spiritual condition of knowing that the place is shared. How exactly do old places foster community? Well, first, by the idea of identity. That shared civic identity represented by the buildings is a way that community is fostered. Another way that's obvious is you meet people and get together, and you know where to meet people and get together at the old places in our community. And the example is post offices. The way people go to post offices is one of the ways that community is fostered in our places. For decades, people have lamented the way sprawl has destroyed the American sense of community and destroyed our small towns. And the placemaking movement and the new urbanist movement promotes places that are walkable, that have front porches, that have cars parked behind, those sorts of things that many old places already have. And I applaud their efforts. I support the idea of new urbanist developments. But something is missing from that, and that is the idea of time. Old places are where people and place and time have intertwined to form community. Community cannot be built. It can only be fostered, and it requires that factor of time in order to be a community. Old places matter because they foster community. Sustainability. Old places matter, I think I have a quote here, because as Carl Elefante says, the greenest building is the building that is already built. The preservation lab, Green Lab, now called the Research and Policy Lab of the National Trust, did a study about the sustainability benefits of old places. And it found, this study, which you can find online, that it takes between 10 and 80 years for a new building that is 30% more green than an existing building to recover the environmental cost of the demolition of an existing building. The reuse of existing buildings is one of the greenest strategies that you can have. In addition, it saves farmland, it saves open space, and it reuses these valuable materials. I use the example of the floor from my own apartment building in Washington, D.C., which has been used continuously for 100 years. I don't know how much more sustainable you can get than that. Old places matter because they are sustainable. So those are the few I'm going through. There are others in the book. I hope you'll turn to them. Through this exploration of why old places matter, though, I, who have been a lifelong preservationist, I've spent 33 years at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, was a little bit surprised to discover something. I discovered that old places actually matter more than I thought they did. They're actually more significant for more reasons than I dreamt about. And a lot of it had to do with those opening ideas of identity and memory and continuity. The work that you do here in Providence preserves all of those capacities for the people of your city and your community. I'm thankful for the work you do for them, but also for myself. I am not a native here. I've only visited here a few times, but I have strong memories of Providence from when I was here before. The National Preservation Conference was held here in 2001, right after 9/11. And I have very vivid memories of that meeting, being at the Biltmore Hotel, hearing David McCullough speak at the Baptist Church just down the street from where we are in a moving way about the importance of America. And I also have memories of weddings I've attended here, friends I've met here, when I came to visit friends in college, when I came to visit scholars at Brown. The work you do preserves the capacity of people to have all of those benefits that I reviewed, and I thank you for that, and I applaud you all for the work that you do. Thank you.